Honourable Adam Searle.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I also rise to make a brief contribution on the report, the second report by a committee of this House into the Ombudsman's handling of Operation Prospect. And of course this second inquiry and report, this time through a general purpose standing committee, arose through what was perceived by members to be a lack of action arising from the first report, the report of a select committee. It was quite clear that evidence given to the first inquiry about when the Ombudsman would deliver a final report left everybody who participated in that first inquiry with the firm belief that it would come and be delivered before the end of the Ombudsman's term of office, which was at the end of June of this year. It became apparent that, of course, that timetable would not be met, and there was some grave concerns about that, and also about the inactivity around a number of the recommendations and suggested actions from the first inquiry. I would also like to indicate that as a member of that committee and as a member of this House, we welcome the report of the new temporary holder of the Office of the Ombudsman. When Mr Barber's term expired, the government did not advertise the position and did not seek to make a permanent substantive appointment, but instead has appointed Professor Macmillan as acting Ombudsman for a period of 2 years. Now, I'm also a member of the Parliamentary Oversight Committee of a number of bodies, including the Office of the Ombudsman, and it's fair to say there was some disquiet about the failure of the government to move to make an ongoing appointment. I wish to stress none of that attached to the person of Professor Macmillan, a person who has a great deal of experience and about whose appointment there could be no criticism. So we welcome his report on this matter and the information it conveys. We think it is an important step towards ending this long-running saga. But I stand by the findings of the inquiry, which made what I think is a fairly uncontroversial point, is that given the long history, the procedural difficulties associated with it, being able to bring the matters, the subject of Operation Prospect, to a satisfactory conclusion must now almost be insuperable, given the tensions and the conflicting interests, not just between senior persons in the New South Wales Police Force, but others who would be called upon to assist the Ombudsman with the inquiry into the substantive matters that are the subject of Operation Prospect. What I think is apparent from both this report and, of course, the earlier report of the Select Committee is that the powers conferred on the Office of the Ombudsman by this Parliament to conduct this inquiry ought not to have been conferred on the Office of the Ombudsman. The Office of the Ombudsman, in the one case we have, seems to not be a satisfactory recipient of those functions.
I might call that an understatement.
I acknowledge that interjection. Not a satisfactory recipient for these functions. Those functions do not sit well or easily with the other roles and functions of the Office of the Ombudsman. And it is also quite clear, given how long it has taken the Office of the Ombudsman to come to terms with the issues, much longer than the original matters that are being inquired into ran for, it's quite apparent that, in my view, as well as the committees, that the Parliament should remove those powers from the Office of the Ombudsman. Although I don't expect them to make any public comment about this, I think such a move would probably be welcomed by those working in the Office of the Ombudsman. Those powers are not compatible with its other functions. I would say that I earnestly hope that the recommendations made by each of the two committees are properly and closely examined by the government and acted upon in an appropriate way. I note that one of the recommendations, which was to look at the police complaints process, wasn't pursued in the way considered by the committees, but rather through a report of Mr. Andrew Tink, a former member of the other place, a former shadow police minister, a former shadow attorney general. We look forward to seeing what it is Mr. Tink has to say about these matters. Well, I acknowledge that interjection. I'm not so sure. My understanding is that the report has been concluded and provided to government, but not released publicly. I think given the fraught nature of these issues and their very unhappy past, it would be a good thing if the government could, even before it's formulated its response to the Tink report, to release the Tink report so that, first of all, there is an air of transparency and openness in this area, which would be, I think, refreshing, but also so that there can be a public discussion commence about the merits of what Mr. Tink has had to say. That doesn't restrict the government's right to develop its response in the way it sees fit, but I do think not releasing the report does give rise to an apprehension of a lack of transparency, which I think we don't need either in the area of police oversight generally or in connection with the issues that gave rise to these two committee inquiries. So maximum transparency and openness. I don't understand there is any reason for the delay. I would also call upon the government to indicate what the reasons for the delay in releasing the Tink report are. If it is a misguided or a misguided notion of, well, we don't just want to have it out there in the public domain, giving rise to all sorts of conjecture and discussion about what might happen in this space, but we want to wait until the government itself has digested all of the issues and thought them through. I can understand why government would take an approach like that in connection with most matters to do with public affairs, but I do think the issue of police oversight and the matters that have given rise to these two inquiries are so sufficiently fraught and difficult and have involved such public controversy and heated discussion that I think it is necessary for this report to be made public as soon as possible, so that the public discussion about what is the next appropriate step for reform in this area can take place without any undue delay. Thank you, Mr. Deputy President.